Are I guess to get a sugar in it. You give each hour, giving them the chili cabla, the sosorana, but you get doing it, top of some other language, winning Juba, yes, and be some Juba Nashi, Juba Dori, she's not in it, they need some budget, I get never seen any giving him the Jawarias as she goes to the sugar there. And it might say, you get it. Lüden toplu parti danju lüdere di günün içinde ya azıcık di yukevi so mabu saçe di danju lüdü topare zaten danju lüdün di dön çimori geçim boşure danju lüdün telatene ne gevam çima ondio ko bato yare gewa çima kasa tarbiyo ko bato yare ne tamjeki basan yo ko bato ya 차상 중에 주투게 dön geçim bo dön tar도 산지요 ko bato ya 주투게 된 개발진 내려요 그래서 데네자 데네기 데네기 뒤엔 초도 주고 데네야 아니 게 데네 야네 야도 상당하지 데네 아니 예 기회냐면 점리 제정주 심라서 파진 주의 냠는데 근데 탈시면 지긴 선의 셈디 템부 랍나신 템부 시대 근데 교환해 받친 도시나 셈 도시 삼다제 냠는 지역으로 해서 지금 생각 도시거래.
Good evening. So what did we look at last week? Well, last week we looked at the need to be aware of the reality of our situation, which is that we are not independent but dependent, and see ourselves as like an emanation which is so clearly dependent. Moreover, we looked at that having come to recognize that we have achieved this supreme freedom of this precious human rebirth, we should recognize just what that means, that we have the very capacity to accumulate the causes for further excellent rebirths and thereby ensure we do not fall to the lower realms. And moreover, we have the capacity to develop the required qualities such as calm abiding, the wisdom realizing emptiness, bodhicitta, and so forth that are required to attain Buddhahood. So we have the capacity to develop these causes. So thinking about this repeatedly over a sustained period, we develop a firm and stable determination to strive to become a Buddha.
lula 기회 냠는 제바가 바시 찍대 가르스는 아주 룰레 차바디게 예수 제사다 룰라 차비게 차바디게 난 보알이야다 도시네 삼다나 도시 마시고 슈거 된 마시에
We continue tonight. Now, according to the outlines by the many great commentaries, such as the one by Kedubje, we recognize that within this chapter on vigilance, and Shantideva has concluded a presentation on the first of the three types of ethics, that of refraining from misdeeds, and now we start with the second type, the ethically accumulating virtuous qualities. And here in the first half of this section, which goes from verse 59 to 83, is a presentation on the need to give up attachment for the body, which is a cause for not practicing the trainings.
Yundin Jede Bati, Yundin Jede Bati, Manyamba, Gone Gondo, Dan Peggy, Pewa Cheese, Pewa Chiggins and Pesamloti. That's Samlotilla, that Kewachudi gets to himself. The nigger Kewachi, Yamlin Jedi, Samlotilla, Kewachudi gets to himself.
The three types of ethical restraint. The first that has been concluded is the ethics of refraining from misdeeds. So that, from its title, is quite clear. And the second type, ethically accumulating virtuous qualities, So here, the virtuous qualities that one strives to accumulate within the confines of what's ethical are qualities such as generosity, patience, and so forth, all of them done within the confines of what is ethical, without going beyond the boundaries of what is not ethical. Moreover, in terms of these virtuous qualities, again, such as generosity, patience, and so forth, these qualities that one has developed to a weak degree, that one develops them to a far stronger degree, and those which one already has accomplished well, to develop those even further. So this is the presentation on ethically accumulating virtuous qualities. The 59th verse. Vultures, out of their attachment for flesh, drag and toss it here and there. You, mind, if you will not be aggrieved then, why do you cherish it so now? Before addressing the verse, as I mentioned, this outline is the general is the outline to do with the ethics of accumulating virtuous qualities. Within this section, from here up to verse 83, the first 11 or 12 verses is about abandoning attachment to the body. This body, which we consider to be my body. So in this presentation of this and the next few verses, where we talk about my body, it is not a presentation that you may have been more used to hearing in the past in terms of I and mine, where we grasp at the self and therefore what is seen to belong to the self as mine. This is not a presentation from the ultimate perspective, but from the ordinary or the conventional perspective, where this presentation seeks to challenge the mistaken way we relate to our body, the mistaken way that we focus on the wrong qualities of the body, the way that we are. So this presentation serves to challenge the way that we are concerned about this body from this perspective of this one life, such as, for example, how it looks, what others think of it, how they react to my body, and so forth. The way that we relate to our body in that regard is mistaken. And it's not just that it's mistaken, it is or rather than saying mistaken, it's that it is an obstacle to our accumulation of virtuous qualities. So this is what this section serves to counteract, this ordinary way, this ordinary but mistaken way that we relate to our body from the perspective of this mere life. To survive in society, we have to work and earn a living so as to look after ourselves. And this earning a living to look after ourselves is largely focused on taking care of this body to ensure that we have somewhere comfortable to live, so that our body is protected from the environment, that we have nice clothes to wear, that we can afford to either have time off to exercise or to go to a gym, and that we can afford the medical treatment we require, and other ways to look after our health. So a lot of our time and energy and mental focus is involved in activities that are directly or indirectly about serving this body. But it's not merely serving the body just from a utilitarian point of view, that the body survives and thrives, but also there is this large added component that the body looks good, that it smells nice, that it's presented well, it's one wears nice clothes and so forth. So for my introduction, we can recognize how much time and energy and focus is on not merely sustaining the body, which is required, but also on ensuring that the body looks good and so forth. But what happens when our inevitable death comes? Well, here in the first two lines, Shantideva presents an illustration that is what's relevant to the time in which the text was composed as to what will come of this body. So the first two lines, vultures out of their attachment for flesh drag and toss it here and there.
근데 쟤네 사고로 와서 쟤네 디송을 말. 내가 이제 자고 네 인치기로 받아 디와는 야사는 디파지어 말와 당네.
So this procedure of how to dispose of a corpse is probably not followed so often here in Australia, but certainly in Tibet, in old Tibet, this was how bodies were disposed of. And clearly, because this text was written in ancient India, then this is how bodies were disposed of. They were taken into the countryside, the corpse was chopped up and was left for vultures to eat and enjoy this rotting corpse or this corpse.
풍보디 수수기 파 셈나 카가체 제제 파도디 안자기 파샤 지파수 제사디 안교라 미가와 지금도 와서다. 당이 풍보를 누기도 아니 세디 아니 최다기 미시에서도 제상이 풍보에서 교란 풍보 셈디기 교란의 풍보에서 나기를 지금도 제사다 인텔이야 안자기 파 태양수 대사 에지 파시 도도 무지리 아니 교란 나가와 지금도 와서 셈교란 미가와 갈리기면 와서 미가 이큐 미가 이제 나와서 지금도 와서
The picture is quite vivid, where one can imagine a group of vultures fighting over the flesh, ripping the body apart. And if one was observing in one's meditation one's own body in this way, then now the third line, you mind will not be aggrieved then. So your mind is looking upon your body being ripped apart by these hungry vultures, but in a way that's quite detached. And so this is the contrast is clear between how we relate to the body, whereas if we look with wisdom and we recognize this is what will happen in the end.
데니게 시제 류디 파카가 차제 자극이 파수사 팅지디 셈큐론 아니 류디야 안지기 에르리티네 치우스 미가와 이기면도 와스 데네 미제 바자 미게나 아나 다다 지체 카데치 시데 다다 데니게 선보 네비 링라 다데서 다데 마시와 선보 네비 링델이야 김제 가르치는 결혼 류디 배지 다도 신 델이야 제바 지진 제고를 해서 제 카데치 세디 지다 기시 마 랍지야발에 구고를 다데 카데치 세디 가르고 무슨에 이 안에 제바지 말고 그래서 가르친 제바지 그래서 다다 지시 카데치 다데 그런 류선본 네바 마시베 네가 네들 그런 류리 배지 라 제바지 델이야 안 배지 네 풍고 다도 진 제바 쉬우진 지진 지도 와서 이 제가 배미도 와서 가르친 제 오월에서 시선의 결혼이 류디에는 자구파 사르사르의 결혼을 안지 델이야 나가와디 삼기미도 와서 엔다지시.
So if one at that time will not, at the time of when one has died, one's body is being fought over by hungry vultures, if you'll not be aggrieved by that, then why to that same body now do you relate to it with such affection? Why do you cherish it so? This really shows that one's attitude or approach to one's body is not so balanced, but there's this exaggeration from attachment. And then just as an aside, the word that is correctly translated as cherish, its modern usage of that particular uncommon word is now the word for a crow, but in all the translations you have as well as this one, it's the ancient usage is that of to cherish something or to have affection for something.
And 다들 결혼 준비 링데라 류텔베 지류딩의 류이선 다그리체 랑 빼제바즈미 슈제바즈미 젠생도 와 진제 한 조치 되는 지기도 와서 대단 내내 결혼 dene jewa kayo marwas karsne yudi kyoran de shirodu ane jagu pa te paden sude saydu kyoran sim kyoran yudi ya ane ji dene ge ji lyude nyugi so magawa che de jeba jin jinba de yongmi was magawa che jigmi was ane mejeba da dade dene ge dagi chen jeba jin go ga jegu was na disi urada.
Yes, Shantideva is drawing this contrast to show to us quite clearly the way that our attached, that due to our attachment for our body, that we care for it with such affection, that this is quite exaggerated. Because the same body, when death comes, it will be discarded, and we too will discard it. We will not care for it then. We won't really care much for what happens to it. But now, because of the exaggeration that comes with the attachment for it, we relate to our body in a way that is overly affectionate, with too much care. So here, what's being challenged is our exaggerated approach to our body. So how then to take, how to look at this body? Because one may well take presentations such as this and what one reads elsewhere to say, oh, we should not care about our body. So what is the more balanced middle way approach?
She sona Yudi Jagu said you can send Maki with Chaya came into us, Magawa Chia into us. That day you got a current support mission teaching all the support news of Migawa Jig was. She sona Jagu gets out of the Kura only support news and Migawa Jig was. Sa in it that they lose the Kura and you without the chairs and shepherds chasing some diet. The degree of Mares, Mariva Cares. The Jehovah Yomares, Miji Garrison, she's on the Ludi Jagogi, signed new some Megawaki came to us.
The way we currently respond to our body, let's say we experience some pain, is that we'll have a negative reverse reaction. Whereas if we had already died and we had departed from this body and we were looking back to it being consumed, looking back on it being consumed by vultures, we wouldn't really be concerned. But now if we're just bitten by a mosquito, we are a bit concerned. We do have an aversion arising to us. So here we see the very different way that we relate to the body now as how we will relate to it in the future.
Is that it? That dinner Dandala Karasungores and Chizante Samtana Digo Mares Digo Marella. Dinner Rang that Matiban that some Afghanistan Gores. Say that did some Tana Martin, then some Gartamores actually.
But what the verse is not presenting, explicitly presenting, is how one then should relate to the body. Because it's making this comparison between how one will, and we already know how we do relate to the body. But how then should we relate to it now in the present, now whilst we have life and we are abiding in this form?
That in a kind of single as an Luins and Dagri, and the Ludi Gua taken. Tapa Timbu Gedina, same Damatawa, Gedina Yamdu, Dehayabaduji, and say some knowledge in the Korgo or whether. In his some stance in to get Ludi, and the Rada, then all the long amount in Ayora said, and you Ludi Guakin and I may pudding Adela Guru, which is a Ludi Guakin, Manzola, some douche and some jore. and I Lojama Dichi is and you do Junia Dream, Ludaharang, I may give you Ludaharang, Junia Madovaji, Dada Badu, then Mamma do Stragi, some lodging on the same dinner, some of the other. Just a Lutapazim, a dozen chatting. Lutapazim would dig. Just that I do some done. I may give the Buddha Malakata, Shingo, Shingo Marma. That I do Ludipes with Champo and a Golia, Jiggy, Dushin and Chasa, and the Jiggy Hakasan G2 and Chicago. Just a Yama, I may give you that you lead Hakon car. Kilo Mason and Kilo Cheshire Mamushu Shorwa, and then Shala Mason, the taller Mason, she would have a Shorwa. Just a hundred December, I may give that day, but you are Guinea and Maroche, Tapo Tempo and Mahopana, Lojama Didici, Tahara, and Nigu, some of the some time you got it. Just a dinner, Tanga to some of the same, the Tanga to Kitty in that Yam China, Kade, you name it. Kitty and Yam to using and Degi, some of Dingle didn't sure. Dinner is some of the time and you get a Nil. Dinner, Yahweh's, you are united to have met again, Tapa Timbu, the next watching, yes, Gun, Uni made again, by Yahoo, the Nigi, chasing Jivas in some sure. This some of Digi, Digo Mares, just this some Dana Digo Mares, this some of Dana Digi, and Karchi orders and some of Dio by Digi, Mom, and a Kiwa Chima Gikasuri, Yamachiwa Tiana, Kiwi, Chao to your Bashichigo, actually.
The way we relate to our body is a way that is not how it conventionally is. We relate to it as if it were permanent, permanent meaning unchanging. Intellectually, we can immediately recognize, of course, it's impermanence, of course, it's changing. We know this body will come to, will die, it will not continue to work anymore. We look over our life, we recognize, of course, it has changed so much. From the point of conception, when I was just, some glob inside my mother's body, throughout from the time of birth to growing up and now aging, it's clear it's changing. But we do not relate to it as if it were impermanent, which it is, but rather we grasp at it as if it were permanent, unchanging. Hence, our disappointment when we look in the mirror, our disappointment at the signs of aging, the changing shape, the changing color of our hair, and so forth. So we relate to our body as if it is not changing. This is then completely unrealistic and not how it is at all. So this view is unbalanced. And moreover, we cherish this body in a way that is also unbalanced. We don't cherish it for its purpose, but rather with an attachment. And this is expressed in how we want to look at a certain way, be perceived by others in a certain way, and we care about how we are perceived in a way that is exaggerated. So here, the real problem with this from the perspective of the Dharma practitioner is this attachment to our body, as well as our grasping at its permanence, are obstacles to our accumulation of virtue, because time and energy are going into things which are not in accordance with reality, and thereby not only is this ignorant fear amplified, but our capacity to engage in virtue is reduced, because we are chasing these falsities. This body, we're trying to make it always look good, to be presentable, in fact, more than presentable, to be appealing. And this is distracting us. This is taking us away from actually fulfilling the great purpose that comes with this body.
and tapa tempo yo mares subu yo ro tapa tempo yo ma de ni chi me ba cha lo shi ro les ji dan shi ro de ji dan sem de da lu ni de ka ma de tempo tapa tempo de ya mi do a sem ka de lu dan sem ni ka de ro chen 되는 류디 자국이 살고 셈처럼 무슨 할도 와서 제가 디세 미가 같이 하면 와서 도나디스 제가 되는사 셈 답을 때고 말해 그런 제 삼바나시 말해 되는 셈디 끼지기 집어 유주 미다바리 되어서 제가 셈 류디 셈 대다 그래서 류디 미다바 끼지 유어도 거래서 류디 셈드는 유년 자연에 되게 이디나 냠도 되게 결혼 삼바나 제바지 마나지 되게 말해 류디 끼지 님이 셈다 자체 시주래 시주 류디 셈다 가가차도 자결라서 사루고 그래서 제가 되게 되네 인자 그런 거 류디 삼나다나디 지금 말 류디 끼디나 이 류디 다버 때부 주어 기능 줘야 됩니다. 셈나 셈디나 끼디나 자면 봐 네그레 삼비 삼나다나디 지금 말해서 그런다.
Yeah, what we are encouraged to do is really go against a lifetime of habitual thinking and so much pushing and strong encouragement by society, and to recognize this body as it is, which is this impermanent phenomenon that is changing moment by moment. That we've gone through this process of change that will end in death, and that is fine. The body is, for many of us, in the process of degeneration and decline, and that is fine. That is its natural process. And being very aware that we are rapidly approaching the time when this very body will be nothing more than a meal for vultures. So this is fine. This is the natural process. So reflecting like this helps to challenge our, or perhaps lifelong obsession with our appearance, what others think of our physical appearance, what we believe they impute on us because of our physical appearance, and recognize this is all trivial. It's focused just on this life. It's not important. What is important is to counter these wrong perceptions, these misunderstandings, and not to have them guide us, deceive us, but rather to let them go and embrace this opportunity, making the most of this opportunity, whatever of it remains, making the most of that. This is the actual balanced approach, not the extreme approach that society has led us towards.
되게 삼당고 했습니다. 간절히 아주 리미터 바꿈 하셔야죠. 쇼월 당시 남는 마선의 지원미터 봤습니다. 이제 연주 되게 삼다다 이제라 지원미터 봤습니다. 쇼로 어디로 송거다. 치디 랑기 유디 계지기 지비 유어제제 제사다 니미치 안에 가 셈드나 자야지 카전 두레스 제사 되네 인자 다 가르치고 해서는 이 루이디 다다 가상 기념마들 루이디 난주 루이디인데 배 루이디는 된체보래 된데야 자고 가르치는 투투레서 자치물에写了知道지난다 루이디 지다 따고 루이디 따고 땜부요 말해서 그걸 끼지기지 지루래 니미치 아는 갈매가 자시 루레스 제가 이제 다디 뒤들어야 랑 루이디 배 다게지 텔이야 따고 제발 진마도 같이 니게 삼다 루이미다 바리 끼지기 지벌 넘지 니미치 매 루레스 제사다 니미치 매 마도 녀려야 다디 야고 되비 대부 예비 링델 루이디 야고 예비 링델이야 루이딘 텔이야니 진발로서 받아 출림로서 냠내지 냠내 탈시부터 지인 선비 어디스는 상담이면 지역으로해서 너나 디스디고 고거든요. 다디 슈라 유딘의 루이디 계시기지 지배하신 남친의 셈나 자이지 제로래 제사 되는 연자 마시베다데 랑 대비진 루이디 탕보다 대부 예비진 될야 니 아니 지발로서 출림로서 냠내 벤 잠니제로서 냠내제디 된될야 냠내제 냠내 탈시부터 지인 선비게 삼나다제 루시는 삼탕고데스 냠지오레스
So this verse links very closely with the verse in the preceding verse. So whilst so Shantideva here is linking these two presentations on ethics, or the first and the second division of the presentation on ethics, through these two verses. The previous verse spoke about this, the supreme freedom that we have obtained, recognizing this supreme freedom that we have obtained. This verse now reminds us that this life, this opportunity that we have is impermanent. It's changing momentarily. Moreover, we are being reminded that the way we relate to this opportunity and this body is completely wrong. We relate to it as if it's permanent, hence we feel we have time. We relate to this body too as if it is unchanging, hence our disappointment when we see ourselves in the mirror, hence our surprise when we have a new pain, a new ache. Recognizing this, rather lift one's mind, lift one's determination, and commit to rather living in a balanced way, not in the extreme way of our society that relates to this body in a way that we need to make it beautiful and desirable, but rather to recognize how fortunate we are to have this life, and to recognize that this body, this life, this opportunity is coming to an end. It is finite. So here you draw on your teachings and your meditations from the Lama on precious human rebirth and the impermanence of this life. And this then leads to the purpose of this presentation, which is the determination to ethically accumulate virtuous qualities. In other words, whatever time period remains of this life, I will utilize this precious opportunity to develop excellent qualities such as ethics, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, wisdom, and others within the confines of what is ethical, and thereby develop a deep habituation to ethical restraint whilst developing my habituation to other virtuous qualities. And that is the very meaning of this second division of ethics, ethically accumulating virtuous qualities. Then coming to the 60th verse, holding onto this body as mine, you, mind, why do you protect it so? Since you and it are distinct, how can it be of use to you? So look in the first two lines, holding onto this body as mine, you, mind, why do you protect it so? So let's take these two lines together, the final line of the previous verse, why do you cherish it so? So here we see that the mind, that Shantideva is challenging his mind, challenging this habituation to say, this body that you grasp at, you hold so closely, as so dear, or you cherish it so, this body that you cherish so is my body. Why do you cherish it so? Why do you protect it so? And this questioning is coming in light of the illustration that Shantideva gave in the previous verse about what will end up when death comes, whether the body is thrown into a funeral pyre or into the blaze of a crematorium or given to wild animals to eat. This is what will end up with the body in time. So why do you hold onto it so dearly, cherishing it so, protecting it so?
제바 진제 되네 류에 송고 와다는 류에 제 류에 소소기 류에 되 현代되 버시나 되는 지금 무슨라 소바되네 직소자는 이 류도 세야다 님 지만 토리아라 소바되 되네 제야라 소바 운도시네 소소기 류에 안식하게 류 송급제야 오늘 류야 네 칼라이 나서 류야 내내기 토네 류 송급제다 자마라 송고로 와다 이소에 대 가르치는 송고로서 삼로 나나 가르치는 이 류인세의 류에 다르지 예희세의 류 다르지 아 얘네 다르지 마마세 아니 배 제벌 증거래서 나 제벌 진나세 제벌 진세디 배 야부래세 지로다 배 야부 삼다나 가르 상담 땅고래서 이 유학인을 줘야 매디간 땡부 스테디 딱보 땡부 아니지 그디네 셈데나 자하메바 아니 딜레 하바 메바로지 삼시 거고 셈 딩라 되는 요르바 당주기 셈 라파라파라다 리디 배 야고레 베스네 안지시 어디 지타마레 삼다 요르바 셈 딩랑 주기 리디레 미데 리디 딱버지 다지 리디 배 마세게 유학인을 줘야 매디 이제 이게 유연기 유 녀모 옹이 중화 많이 봐도 배 짱마로 얘네게 삼로 지금 아주 그 코디고 봐 제벌 짐바세 되니시 고거래 제가 얘네게 삼다나디 제가 대신에 주반에 되네 삼다나디 얘네 인다 삼다와나신 다가다 레미도 와서 그래서 기지기지 유어도 와서 유도 와서 유르네 시도도 와서 제가 되는 시도 와서 시도도 류다 셈 카데도 와서 제가 되네 인자 균천 되네 있는 결혼에서 류디 가르치는데 지금 제아파지는 송고 버려서 되네 다를 진 제아파지는 송고에서 가요 말 와서
As in the previous verse, here we are being challenged to recognize that the way we naturally relate to our body, the way society also encourages us to relate to our body, is actually an extreme a way of thinking, an extreme view, you could say. So we all hold our body closely, relate to it as our dear body. And so the way I'm talking about it is how we actually relate to it. We may have an intellectual approach which is different, but the real way we relate to our body is with maybe you could say a kinship, a warmth, a closeness, which is actually quite exaggerated, far from a realistic perspective. We can see this by the strength of aversion that arises for minor discomfort. For example, it's quite cold, and we look at our reaction when we walk out of later we'll walk out of the warm gompa into the cold outside, and we'll have quite a reaction. It's a very minor discomfort, but we see the strength of that reaction. Or should an insect bite us? There's a little mosquito. It's not much of a big deal, but we get quite annoyed. Or a little bit of hunger. We can have a strong reaction to this. And this all just shows the strength of grasping at this body, this exaggerated way of relating to it. And in addition to this, we relate to the body as if it were unchanging or permanent. And again, we need to be very clear that intellectually we recognize one thing, but deep in our mind, we relate to our body in a very different way. Intellectually, of course, we all know we're going to die. We recognize this body has gone through a tremendous period of growth and growth or change. From conception up to now, we recognize for most of us we are in the period of decline. Intellectually, we all know this, but this is not how we relate to our body. Every new ache and pain we relate to or respond to with aversion. And whilst we know this body doesn't define who we are, it doesn't say that much about us, about how we really consider ourselves, the words of others about our body, whether it's praise or whether it's an expression of scorn, this hits us in a way that shows the exaggerated way we relate to this body that we hold onto as mine. So here, Shantideva, with these questions, why do you protect it so? Why do you cherish it so now? He's challenging us to look at how we naturally relate to our body and see how exaggerated this is, how far from a realistic, balanced view it is.
니네 지시 송화지 가진 리 송급 제고 리 송급 제교 말해서지 그거 가진 리 송급 제고 제거해서지 제사다 아주 니네 섬는데 리 송급 맞은데 다디 맞은데 이거 말리 송급 제고로 왔다 가지 리 마송 보이네 네 내나서 보고 그래 니네 강아지 신 직강한 시부체다 니네 이게 나즈다하다 니네 시도에 내가 여러 리 송고로 왔다 송급 제고로 왔어 근데 계시면도 될이야. 단쇼리들 빼면서 기침보래 짜침보래 시직시에로 왔다. 진짜 내내 자다 뉴스고 말해서 디디 아주 켈린 두사 말해서 용서로 왔다. 삼론나 용서로 왔. 지시 송아 지시 류가신 송고 송교 말해서 이게 켈린 두사 말해서 배삼로 용서로 왔.
Yeah. And what the presentation is pushing us towards is to try and have a more balanced approach, a balanced view towards our body, to recognize our current view is extreme. Therefore, do not, when you see this, why do you protect it so in the second line, go off to another extreme and think, oh, well, I can just discard my body. This is then just replacing one extreme for another. Of course, the body needs to be protected. This is, afterwards, a precious human rebirth, or this term translated as precious human rebirth, literally is a precious human body. So it is a precious human body, but we should relate to it in a balanced way.
제사다 류송고 우리 류송급 제고고가 제사다 류레 나자마 포에 단다리아 노송급 제야단 최된 제야단 되게 안에 지 류리아 차발이야 차베세 둘로고야 차베세 아니야 되게 고야다 되게 송급 류송고고를 류 아니 마송바나 아니 송급 마체바나 류레 나자이 포선데 내가 저기 계획자와 냠렌지 두고 말에 현리야 팬별도는 두트여요 말와 내가서 류송고고를 유승고 맞아 류균의 자원균의 순교 말에 순고 말때디 지시를 송하지 가신 류승고를 송여요 말에서 이게 지단에 가서 류승고가 말 류리아 따도 주기요 말에서 순고 말이야.
So certainly what we are not being pushed towards is to go to the opposite extreme and to neglect our body, to even take pleasure in austerities. This is foolish. We need to protect our body from illness. We need to try and look after our health so we can have as many healthy years as possible. But the reason for this is not just so that we can enjoy the abundant comfort of our modern age, but rather we utilize this precious opportunity to accumulate virtue. In other words, to accumulate our habituation to the various virtuous qualities, the various virtuous ways of thinking. This is the purpose of looking after our body, of protecting our body, so that we can strengthen our habituation to virtuous ways of thinking.
And that 류순교 말 가르친 순고를 순교 말에서야지 가르순고에서는 류디랑 ben에 네 류선 바 다그지 베디 제버진세 대시 제버진나디 교균에 둬야 메디게 따와 템부 셈나 계지다 자와메 지도 네티행 데니기 삼노토네 삼노 땅지 삼노 디토네 류디레야 제버 데니기 류송교 지교 말에서 삼노 데리스타 류송교 지교 말에서 류디 교균에 둬야 메가 따와 템부레스 따와 진비 진바 따와지 데네 류디 교균에 둬야 기디 나면 자와메 셈나 지도 네티행 데니기 삼노 땅지 류디레야 제버진네 제 가서 송나 지교 말에서 얘네 손에 뒤고 말해. 얘네 류디 요거요 말아 봐서. 류 끼지기 교어주고 류 균에 교하면 류지고 요 말해. 류 안심난 끼지게 다음에 번에도 류지 요 말해. 매번 인자 얘네 그 수부 류디 그래서 류세대 가지고 수풍지고다 수풍대대 네디 수풍지 얘네기 제가 얘네기 이 매번자 얘네기 삼땅지 류디 송교 말해. 군노가 얘네기 토는 류디 송교 지교 말해서 이 소급 제외는 차방 기기에서 차방 먹고 기기에서
I encourage you to really recognize that we relate to this body as if it is unchanging, because this way that we naturally relate to our body is very different from what we intellectually all know and accept clearly. But it's not how we live. We live as if our body is unchanging, as if we expect it to be unchanging. Hence our surprise at a new pain, ache or pain, or at the physical signs of aging. Not just our surprise, but our disappointment, our wishing it wasn't like that. So we need to recognize this, because then we can challenge this mistaken view, and rather recognize this body is changing. Therefore, I need to look after it. Because a key reason why people do not look after their health and their health when they have the opportunities to is because they look at their current situation and say, "No, this is okay," not really recognizing that it is degenerating, it is deteriorating, it will only get worse. Therefore, one needs to look after one's health and exercise, eat well, etc. So this isn't, as a not recognizing the unchanging status of our body, we can neglect it. Moreover, not recognizing the unchanging status of our body, we become even more attached to it. Seeing and to being more attached to our body, this leads to suffering when our attachment's not fulfilled. It also leads to us putting time and energy into ensuring that it's beautified. And it leads to us suffering when others don't relate to it in the way we want them to, or we hope them to. Moreover, by relating to this body as if it's unchanging, if it's permanent, we will also be relating to the opportunity that this body, this life presents as being as there being time ahead of us, when in reality we do not know that this is the case. So therefore there are many faults that follow through relating to ourselves as being unchanging, as permanent. We will not look after our body as well as we should. Our attachment will grow. We'll waste this opportunity to accumulate virtue. Where we need to come to in the meditation again and again is this recognition that both this body as well as the opportunity that comes with this life is naturally declining. And this is something to recognize and on one hand to accept. It's not something to fight against or wish that it isn't. This body is a compounded phenomenon. It's come about in dependence on causes. So to this life, this opportunity, it will come to an end. That is okay. But I must make the most of this opportunity. And the way to make the most of this opportunity is to cultivate virtue, to cultivate our strengthening habituation to generosity, ethical restraint, patience, and so forth. This is the very meaning of living a meaningful, a purposeful life. And to do so then, I must look after my health so that I have as long a period in good health and with mental vitality so that I can accumulate virtue. Then when we look after our body, we are doing so with a virtuous motivation. It's not about vanity, but it's about ensuring we can accumulate virtue.
루디 안 가르치는 교회 가르치는 송고를 송고요 말이에서 또 직디니기도 둘이 쉬잔디데.
So these first two lines, holding onto this body as mine, you mind, why do you protect it so? So here, the meaning comes down to why are you guarding this mind, this body, out of attachment, and why are you guarding it so with this attitude of it being something that is unchanging, when in reality it is changing momentarily. It needs to be protected, but for the purpose of accumulating virtue, not as an expression of vanity, and not with trying to fight back the inevitable. So again, we are being challenged to take a realistic, balanced approach to our current situation.
타데바레 이제 소소와레스 진짜 류다 다디 류티다 다디 아주 류티다 아주 셈니디 카가 소소레스 그디나 지기야 말레스 예와면 그 그디나 냠드디디 지바 말레스 제사도 소소와레스 켜다 디 소소라 제사 디니자 대고 켜라 지식자 켜라 세비 제사 대고 되나 디나 대고서 디나 되네 소소이나 안에 류 가서 소소이해서 켜다 류 소소래 그래서는 류디기야 니 결혼 카데이지는 카가 차로 그래 이미지 류 바시리 셈나 카데 류디게 셈 결혼 샤샤로 그래 셈 결혼이라 류디 바샤 거래서 제상 지지리 파 저음에 같이 도시는 그거래서 켜다 디니 소소나세 디소 류 셈켜다 결혼이다리 류레 내사기 류디니 네 카가 소소레스 디디니 찍바 말해 디디니 여와 체미디 찍디 말해 타데 말해 지난 소소레스 이미지 엔 류디기 결혼 방지 결혼 샤네 셈 결혼 샤네 류디 결혼 카가 차도 우리스 아니 대두리스 아니 셈 결혼이야 류디 바샤지는 카가 차고 샤기도 와서 루신 누구로 와서 대단 죄다 류디니 소소나세
지금 Third line, since you and it are distinct, the it refers to the body and you refers to the mind. Shantideva here, we see in the second line, it's just saying you, mind. So the third line, since you, mind, and it, the body, are distinct. Here, Shantideva is making it clear that the body and mind are distinct. And when death comes, the mind will separate from the body. The mind will go on to a new body and have no relationship then with that corpse left behind.
류디 결혼을 가르쳐야 민도 와서 류디 결혼 가르쳐야 됐어. 그래서 류디 결혼 샤샤지 두고래. 아니 결혼한 카데지 두고래. 결혼 류디 결혼 가르쳐야 돼. 그래서 민도 와서 어쩌죠. 류디 결혼 지자 결혼 가르쳐야 됐어. 결혼 배 지금 제발지 에너지 다도 진 제발지 진되어 판도 개민도 류디 결혼 샤샤 두고도 셈 결혼 샤샤 카덴 두고도 와서 근데 셈 결혼이야. 바 류디 바 샤제 카데네 파스 샤기도 와서 제가 내내산 류디 결혼을 가르쳐야 됐어. 시시자 가르쳐야 돼. 제 민도 판도 민도 와서 그다.
The fourth line, how can it be of use to you? So this can be expressed as you will be separated, you mind will be separated from your body, as you will leave it behind. How can it be of use to you then, when you will leave it behind and go on into a new body? How can it be of use to you then? So this then links back to this fourth line. How can it be of use to you? Links back to Why do you protect it so? Why do you cherish it so? And these all come down to the exaggerated way in which we relate to our body. That we relate to the body in an extreme way, an exaggerated way, a way that is not balanced, that is not in accordance with reality.
and 결혼 강한 디니기 아니 마 제와 치말을 좀 치료해 가면 누워 진짜 가야 제면 누워서 유이디 결혼게 이징을 마신이래야 랑게 제다 두지 집에 다 그리지 안 답아 땡부 주어 주에면 제진제 진거래 진거를 때 시류갑라 아니 유이디 아니 결혼 샤샤 두고래 재산 샤샤도 결혼게다 유이디 좀 마이 버지 냠도 can't do sha to ya can be was ludi and chorangi ma jiwa chimbala za chimbu yin pa ma je ma ta wa che nyam do sha ya mi do za chimbu yin ga ma jiwa chimbu do ge che do ge de ke mi do che za ka ya mi do was ji ji ja ludi choran le ni choran da bo de be ka ya da ge jin be ji da bo de bu juwa me ba che ba ya ho de che ba jin de be de ge ani shi du ka la ludi ka de de choran ka ko che mi do was 가가마나지 야투에 민도 아니 놈들 마치도에 가민도 배주 가민도 왔습니다. 근데 지시하세. 대시디 갑라 지시고다 시디 르카와도 그런 같이 또 가민도 왔어.
What's really being pushed at here is the reason why we relate to our body, in the way that we do. So Shantideva is making clear here in this third line, when death comes, your body and your mind will separate. And there'll be nothing you can do about it then. There is no way that you can take your body with you. So then why do you protect it so? Why do you cherish it so? What are you doing? Focusing so on beautifying your body, on worrying about what others say and think about it, how you physically present yourself to others, and so forth. You're putting all this time and energy into something which has no real value, into propping up a view which is not in accordance with reality. So this is what is being challenged here.
디삼다나디 다 지고 말레스 제산 디삼다나니 나신 위딩오 디니시베스네 말레스 리옹오 코롱오 카레스네 이지기지 지비 워 유라신 제지 유로 이지기 지루고데 제산 다 디니게 따바템 보메바 지 메바리 제산 인지 그디 님이 지금 아니 루이다 셈 카데지네 한 카데로 시도리스 제산 디네자 따바템 보메바 디삼다나 지요 말레스 나삼가 땅고레 람나 먼저 류디 계지기 지배라 셈 류코랑 원원이 되거래서네 계지기 지배라 신이 계지기 지도 따고 땜부 매바들이 디네사 당한 류디 계지기 지배라 따고 땜부 매바리 아슴베기 다 디네기 류미다 와인바 삼다야다 니촌다 제자 계지기 지배 따고 땜부 매바서 류디 계지지에 매바요 말아 계지 최선의 지도야 녀가 제자 나다 유디 예배 링리야 유디 대우 예배게 탕고 예배 링델에 마지게 링델이야 이 개회 자와 아니 짐바도 줄임라서 봐 근데 잠니지 kom이야 자주 셈 kom이야 자주 셈하는 게 얘네게 삼다제 잠니제 제가 그래서 잠 짐바도 줄임라서 지금 냠nen디게 날 냠nen지 마게 받는 개발제 개발게 많이 보고네 보니 좋아지 냠는 거로 와 당아서 성아서 자바 있나 아주 유디 따빠팀부 요마케디네 니치게 미데베라지 유루고레 니미치 시루고레 지사 디네자 다다 시루바이나 이제 류디레야 아주기 냠네 가르치나 지투에기 된다 침부 줍투에 여바디 이 비주 마다마친 털라던 디엔자등이 유된 데리야 기회냐면 즉 강도 지긴 선비다 도시는 것에 심주 계제 아주 기회다 잠 이제 공부하래 점로 지하래 소수기 기회냐면 가르투빈데 제 도시냐면 지게서 냐면 제가 마게 바디에 냐면 지게버지 하다 말 소수기를 냐면 여바디 야네 야도 냐면 지지 뭐 공부에 다한테 지어버려서 너는 인보디 디승고를 당하고 미다바고 계지기지 집이 미다바고 지산 류디 단주의 밀류를 뭐지 자치 보시고 지래 지산대 인사 다버 템부요 말이다 템부이 다도 유리 링들이야 기회 냠는데 가르치는 지역거리 세트소 지산 이게 단단 인보디다 미다바를 계지기지 집에 유가란 지래 아 선배 삼다 되는 인사다 이 류딘 델이야 다들 마지비 뒤지다 이 기회 냠는 잠이 조금 해야 되지 ਸਮ고미야라 소바냐면 탈시 버디지 선배기 삼나제 냐면 지오래 해서 너네지 숨거다.
Meaning of what is being presented here, the very purpose of this presentation from Shantideva, is to recognize this wrong view that we have of relating to this both this body and this life as if it were permanent, in other words, unchanging. And so this I've spoken about quite a bit already tonight. But you are required to look into yourself and really recognize how we do actually live as if we expect this body not to change and this life not to end. Hence our surprise when we get new aches and pains, when they're the signs of our body degenerating. We need to recognize, and we also have this view that there is time ahead of us. We can delay our spiritual practice for another day. So we need to recognize these signs of our grasping a permanence and challenge that. And be very aware for the many signs that our body gives us of impermanence. And when we recognize them, challenge our mind to rejoice in recognizing this sign of impermanence, rather than being disappointed or proud in response, but generate a sense of recognition. Yes, this body is changing. It is in a process of decline because it is impermanent. And when we recognize this in our body, immediately our thoughts should go to, and therefore my life too is coming to an end. My inevitable death is drawing ever closer. This then leads to reminding us of the need to make the very most of whatever remains of this opportunity, to accumulate as much virtue as we can. In other words, strengthen our habituation to the minds of generosity, of ethical restraint, of love and compassion, and so forth. So this is also how Bodhisattvas were trained. They would be striving, though, to develop the actual perfections, to developing those which are still quite undeveloped for them, and strengthening those which are already developed. But for us, we need to relate to this as making the most, in terms of the teachings on precious human rebirth and death and impermanence, to come to this conclusion that I have to make the most of this life. I need to make this particular life, or this remaining period of my life, a period that really matters. I need to turn this life into a life. If one looks back in the future of a stream of lifetimes, this was a lifetime that had great meaning and had an impact on the stream of lifetimes to come. This I need to do now. I need to make sure that I keep my mind focused on virtue. Sure, my mind doesn't come under the influence of the afflictions, and thereby I set a good course for my future lives too. This then is the meaning of the presentation.
and the res Lucian some more and the some then the nigger some how watch it. In some tane that the Ludin delia 이 개위 냠는 야보 좀 주마도 봐이나 개와 뉘디 아니 구이바다 냠바 차소나 냠소나 되는 게 뉘디 텔이야 개위 냠는 제주도 투 말에 안 뉘디나 카제소나 안 개와 치말 뉘디 된지기 되는 뉘디인데 토다마도 하고요 말와 그 간내시키는 하고요 말디네 인자 뉘디 텔이야 안 개위 냠는 직탈 냠는 제나는 직직인 선배 도신의 삼 때문에 삼나지 개위 냠는 배수 제거를 해서 도나지 숨거래 진짜 미다봐 류 깨지기 집에 미다봐 따과지면 삼는데 너를 뒤지겨 니삼 따과지면 따증이 토네 류송야다 직 리송 송급제의 지겨 말해서 니디가 말 진짜 류 깨지기 집에 미다봐 임바 뭐니 수디 하고 왔지 하고서는 얘네 삼단에 유된 될이야 얘네 개위 냠는 강도도 제거를 해서 이송보다는 이보다
The entity of our body, so what this body is in terms of its nature or essence, is that it is impermanent. It is changing momentarily. And that is contrary to how we relate to it. So for ourselves as Buddhists, as religious practitioners, we need to challenge these views which are not in accordance with reality, abandoning them, and rather develop views which are in accordance with reality. Because any view that we have that is not in accordance with reality does not benefit and will only harm. It will push us in directions which are not at all beneficial, but hinder our spiritual development. So we need to recognize that this body is in the continuous process of change, and it is only changing towards or heading towards its decline, its complete decline. In other words, the time when this body will only be good to be served to wild animals is approaching. Therefore, the opportunity that this precious human rebirth presents, this is coming to an end. When this mind is recognized, is truly developed within oneself, the mind becomes light and joyous because with this determination, one applies oneself to virtue. And this applying oneself to virtue makes the mind light and joyous. When we really recognize this in an unshakable way, that I don't have that much time. What I have left, I must utilize well. And then we do so in a continuous manner. We accumulate virtue. Our mind becomes ever more virtuous, therefore ever more joyous. And then a confidence grows within us. I have now been using this final period excellently for quite a period of time. I now know whenever the end does come for me, I'll be able to look back at this final period of my life with a mind of joy, knowing that I'm moving into my new body, and I'll be moving into that new body with a mind in which I've developed excellent habitual tendencies. I can have confidence then in the quality of my mind in my next life. This is what we're working towards. To achieve that, one does need to look after this body. One does need to protect it. One does need to cherish it in the sense of to take good care of it. But we do so not out of attachment, not so as to be praised by others, but because we want to accumulate virtue, and therefore we need to have as many good years, healthy years as we can. So with that motivation, we look after our body, we let go of harmful habits, and we embrace healthy habits. And we do so, though, with a focus to live a meaningful life and make this final period something of great value.
la mitapa imba chila ngazo tapa jingo re chede di lo he re di zina no chu re di she di re chida la pumbo di mitapa re tapa jingo re di tapa jingo lo di no chu re si go ta de ne la mo zangbo me wa mi zang wa ji li ya ngazo zang wa re zang ma jingo re di ya no chu re lo she re si go de ne anen la ya ane chige dunga imba chile ya dunga le dunga imba chile ngazo dewa jingo re yan no chu re so re la da do mo chu ba chile ya ngazo da do chu ba jingo re yesu cha sang lo di no chu re so ni mo che ji wa de de ji de da che sa ju yuan pong bo di ke yuan la mi da ba ke ji ju mi da ba imba chile ya ne ju wa ju ne zhe da ba ding bu jin de ji jin ba de jie ba jin ba de ji go ma no chu re sa ji song wa
What Shantideva is pushing us towards is to challenge wrong conceptions. There's a common presentation of 4 wrong conceptions. This is turning us towards this conceiving the impermanent as permanent. And this is what we do with both this body and this life. They are impermanent, but we conceive them as permanent. We also, so that is what is explicitly presented here. But in your meditation, you're welcome to take it further and challenge these other wrong conceptions, where we perceive the unclean as being clean, as well as grasping or conceiving that which is actually suffering in nature as being happiness. This too is a third wrong conception. So grasping or conceiving the impermanence as permanence is the first, the unclean as clean the second, the what is in nature or in essence suffering as being happiness, and then finally that which is actually selfless as having a self. So this is what Shantideva is heading us towards. Then of these 4, as I mentioned, we've looked at the first, grasping or conceiving the impermanence as permanent. Next week, and the next week we will look at the as the unclean as clean. So all 4 are not presented here, but this is the direction that we are being taken in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.